Thank you very much for joining today. Today is our final day of the workshop number 1, the workshop series conducted by Magnus Academy in collaboration with the M+ project team. And today we conclude the first workshop series on presentation, English language usage, and even we had one session especially for the usage and optimization of the virtual platform Zoom and how you manage your presentations and how you host, if you are a host, how you manage this hosting part as well. So altogether there were 5 sessions, and with today's session we cover 6 sessions for the CPD series, or this is the one workshop series. So one of the workshops we conclude today, and we would request all of you to be in touch with the groups you are in, if you are into a WhatsApp group, and we recommend you to continue for you to have our future details. At the same time, if anybody needs to obtain your certificate, so you have to be in touch with the WhatsApp groups until we conclude all the certification process as well. සියලු දෙනාට සුබ සන්ධ්‍යාවක් ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා. අද අපි අවසාන දිනේ අපි කතා කරපු workshop series එකේ පළවෙනි workshop එකේ අද අවසාන දිනේ. ඒත් ඒක අද විශේෂ දවසක් සහ විශේෂයෙන්ම අපි මතක් කරන්න ඕන පසුගිය sessions 5 ඇතුළත සහ අද අපි අවසන් කරන 6 වෙනි session එකත් එක්ක අපි workshop series එකේ workshop number 1 කියන එක අපි ඉවර කරනවාද. අපි ඉංග්‍රීසි භාෂාවේ හැසිරවීම, presentation එකක් කරන හැටි සහ වේදිකාවක ඔබ අමතන හැටි, ඊට අමතරව විශේෂයෙන්ම අපි virtual platform එකක්, ඒ කියන්නේ අපි කතා කරපු Zoom platform එකක් නිවැරදි ආකාරයට භාවිතා කරන හැටි සහ ඔබ hosting කිරීමක් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන එහිදී අපි භාවිතා කළ යුතු විශේෂ tools ගැන අපි කතා කරා. ඒ වගේම අද විශේෂ දවසක අද අවසාන වශයෙන් අපි විශේෂයෙන්ම young professionals ලට සහ විශේෂයෙන්ම විශ්වවිද්‍යාලවල අවසන් වසර සහ 3 වෙනි වසර ආදී වසරවල සිටින ශිෂ්‍ය ශිෂ්‍යාවන් ඉලක්ක කරගෙන තමයි අද හුඟක් දුරට මේ අද දේශනය පැවැත්වෙන්නේ. විශේෂයෙන්ම ඔබගේ report writing, අපි කියන abstracts, උඩා mini reports, ඒ වගේ දේවල් ලිවීමේදී කොහොමද භාෂාව හසුරවන්නේ සහ ඒදී තාක්ෂණික පැති මොනවද කියන දේවල් ගැන අපි සාකච්ඡා කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. So if I'm to brief about today's session, as I mentioned, today is a very special day, especially for those who are at the latter part of your higher educations, maybe third year or final year students, or else even every professional have to write something someday, which is especially about the reports and many reports of the abstract. So today we are going to have a quick glance. I'm sure that Rochelle would not be able to cover everything today. It's just about 1.5 or maximum 2 hour session. So I'm sure that she will do best in terms of eye-opening and highlighting the areas under the topics of, if you have seen the flyer, it's basically the useful phrases for formal communication. That's number 1. Number 2, basics of formulating a report. And number 3, basics of formulating an abstract. So those are the key areas today we are about to cover. For that, we have a very special personality. As I mentioned at the beginning, Rochelle Michael is our resource person today, and she is technically a registered Advantage Standard member and a course provider registered with the British Council, Sri Lanka. At the same time, most importantly, she's a founder and an educator of JMR Academy. On top of everything, she's one of the best personality I have met, who's selfless to share her knowledge, especially with these young girls. And she's been engaged with many of such programs, sometimes voluntarily, not being paid even. And today she takes about 1.5 hours or maximum 2 hours of your time, and she would definitely open our eyes. At the same time, she would definitely guide and highlight the areas where we need to focus, particularly when it comes to report writing and abstract. Ladies and gentlemen, without taking much of a time, I would like to invite our resource person today, Rochelle Michael. Rochelle, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Nalin, for that wonderful introduction. It's lovely to see more than 170 people taking part at this session today. So though I can't see your faces, I always prefer presentations to be interactive. So on the Zoom platform, the best way that I try to keep my audience engaged is by asking them to use the reaction buttons, plus by using the message section where you could message and ask questions and respond when I ask questions. Is everyone okay with that? If you're okay with that, I would like to see some reactions popping up. So let me say that a little bit in Sinhala as well. Okay, great. There goes. Okay. So other more than 170 in a platform Zoom platform මට මේක ලොකු දෙයක් platform එකේ ඔයගොල්ලොත් එක්ක මගේ knowledge එක share කරගන්න පුළුවන් වෙච්ච එක. මම කැමති හැම වෙලේම session එක interactive විදියට යනවට. So interactive විදියට යන්න ඔයගොල්ලෝ කරන්න ඕනේ two things. One, use the reaction button. Either if you have questions, equivalent to raise hand icon, you have the thumbs up if you're agreeing with what I'm saying. Also, message platform where you could type your messages and ask questions. Right. So without further ado, let me quickly share the screen and then let's start talking. So we have very limited time. So my focus is mainly going to be on the first part of today's presentation, which is a few phrases, which I hope all of you will be able to take back with you and use on a day-to-day basis. So from what Nalin said, I understand some of you are professionals working in certain industries, and some of you are from universities, either in the second or third year or the final year, which is completely fine. So I have tried my best to make this presentation as generic as possible. Make a good common video my presentation so all of you should be able to grasp one thing or the other, hopefully. So my question to all of you before I start. Communication, the word communication. What are some types of communication you are already aware of? I'd like to see some messages in the chat box. What are some kinds of communication?
Rochelle, for a moment, just sorry to disturb you, and
yes.
I think we have to ask Sanjay to enable the chat box because we used to disable.
Already done, Mishnah.
I already see messages coming in. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen. And Sanjay, Rochelle, I think you need to be enabled for the whole session, right?
Yes,
I prefer.
I have.
Yeah. Okay. We will. All right. Okay.
Right. Thank you. And I, of course, see quite a few answers coming in already. There is written communication. There's one-way communication, of course. Well, there's direct communication. So there are different types of communication. So today, of course, we are going to focus on written communication, especially formal written communication. So the next question would be, when it comes to written communication and formal sense, what are some places where you will be using formal communication? Formal kiyanne machang level ekata with friends kata karne ka newe. So where would you be using formal communications? What are some places you could think of? I'm asking you about places. Like, right, I'm being given, okay, at office, yes. I'm talking about places, like physical places where you would typically be using formal communication. Right, in an office setting, of course, okay. At meetings, yes. If you're in school or universities, you will have to be using formal communications there as well. So let me quickly take you to the next slide. Then ඊළඟ slide එකේ what I'm trying to show you is what are some types of formal communication. Then හැම වෙලේම formal communication කියනකොට when you are in a company, especially if you are in a company, there are people who are at your same level. ඔයාගේම level එකේ ඉන්න කට්ටිය ඉන්නවා. Plus there are people who you report to. ඔයගොල්ලෝ report කරන කට්ටිය ඉන්නවා. Also there are people, if you're a manager or if you have a team, there are people who work as a team under you, right? So if you look at this screen, there are different types of formal communication. So downward කියලා කියන එක, it's obviously between a manager and then your subordinates. Upward කියනකොට, so you're reporting to someone. maybe you're reporting to a manager, maybe you're reporting to a team leader. So that's an upward communication. Horizontal කියනකොට, that's the same level, right? So you might be talking or rather writing through emails to someone at your same level. On the other hand, there is something called diagonal communication. Then office එකක් කියලා කියනකොට, it's not just your department. There are many departments. HR තියෙනවා, finance තියෙනවා, sales department තියෙනවා. So there are many departments in a corporate setting. So diagonal communication is typically between you and you from one department and another person from a different department. So this is something I want you to keep in mind while we are going through the next 5 phrases. So I'm going to make it extremely basic. Some of you might already know this, but that's okay. Just tag along with us. At the end of this first segment, where we are talking about 5 important phrases that you could use, those 5 phrases should be good enough for you to make a short email, to write a short email. So let's see, after we go through the 5 phrases, if some of you, or even all of you, if possible, are able to type a short email through the chat box and send me just to see, and maybe we could read a few which we think would be outstanding, right? So that's what I'm planning to do in the first segment. So now that we know these are some types of formal communication, so we do have to go through each of them at some point in our life. So formal writing. So some of you guys already told me what kind of writing is available. One is through emails, one could be through letters, and some of us, we write reports and abstracts. So this is especially true if you are taking part, if you are in a team which is more technical, you end up writing reports. Or if you're in the finance department, there's a lot of reports that you end up writing. And on the other hand, abstracts. Abstracts, of course, is something you would end up writing if you are into scientific research, etc. And then on the other hand, we have memos, which is like a very short note you write to give a quick message. Memos are a very short note. So for this session, we are only focusing on reports and abstracts. But before we move on to reports and abstracts, I want to quickly take you through 5 phrases which you can use easily in any emails or any formal letters that you would be writing. I'm sure that would come handy. Without further ado, let's move on to the first one. So before moving on to the first one, the other question, now I've been talking quite a bit for the last 5 minutes or 7 minutes. One question might be popping up in your heads. Okay, Rochelle, so you're telling all of these things. Now, how do I master these? How can I master this within these 1.5 hours of presentation that you're doing? I'm sorry to disappoint you a little bit, but it is a lifelong learning process. That is the truth. Okay, so today what we are trying to do is to give you a little bit of encouragement. Podi encouragement ekak, podi pep talk ekak tamai we are trying to give you in order for you to take your writing skills to the next level. Okay, and this is a quote that I found and I thought it is very apt. Writing hitanakota, writing is an exploration. You're just you have to keep writing for you to be better at it. I guess any skill for that matter, not just writing, any skill, only when you start doing more of it, you can get better at it. So it's the same with writing. So don't worry, but just start. That's what's important. I know there are some people who work in offices who always keep thinking, oh, what if there's a spelling mistake? What if I put in instead of on? Or what if I put some other word that is not right? The person who is reading my email. One thing I also want you to remember is English is not your first language, right? So if you're, I'm sure all the participants in this Zoom meeting are Sri Lankans. So none of your first language is English. So it's either Sinhala or Tamil. So in that sense, if you are learning English, that's an additional language that you're learning. So just be proud of yourself and then let's take it from there. Well, this is the very first opening any of you probably will be using when you're writing an email or even a letter. Okay, so most of you probably know this. When I start a letter or when I start an email, especially in an office, you wouldn't be like, hi, Machan. You wouldn't say that, right? You would start with dear. You wouldn't even say hello. But I know nowadays the communication, even in corporate settings, especially in modern corporate settings, it is kind of narrowing this down a little bit. And there are people who would start with hi, hello, and all of that. But for this moment, we will only focus on extremely formal settings. So generally, in a very extremely formal setting, we use dear sir or madam. That is when you don't know who is at the other end. Okay, you don't know if it's a male or a female who is receiving your email or letter, and you end up just putting dear sir or madam. So you can use the slash. Slash. You don't have to say sir or no. You can just say dear sir, madam. If you know who is receiving your letter, it could be either, let's say, for example, Mr. Pereira or someone. So you can say Mr. and do not put the first name. Kavadawat me palaveni nama. Now, for example, let's say one of you is writing a formal letter to me. You wouldn't go, dear Miss Rochelle. You should typically go as, it should typically go as dear Miss Michael. Mage last name එක තමයි දාන්න ඕනේ formal letter එකකට. Now, if someone is receiving it as Miss Rochelle, no one is going to like scold you. But then again, they will know that your formal writing skills are not on point here. That is something they will get to know if you just put dear Miss Rochelle, or if you just address the person by the first name. Okay, so if you don't know, safest option, dear sir, madam, and always make sure to put a comma. Now, these are small things I'm just going to tell while presenting, though it's not on the screen. I've seen emails, people writing to me, or even when I correct some of my students' emails, punctuation is extremely important when we communicate. Depending on the punctuation only, our brains will know මෙතන තමයි මේ sentence එක මම පොඩ්ඩක් නවත්තලා කියවන්න ඕනේ කියලා. So if not, if you just put all at once, our brains will translate it in a different sense. So that's the whole point why you use commas and colons and all these different punctuation marks. So that is the very first opening line, formal communication. Is everyone on board so far? Can we move on to the second useful phrase? Do we have few reactions? I'm not sure if I could see everyone's reactions here. Okay, thank you. Right, got it. Moving on. Generally, when you're writing an email or a letter, both, okay? If you're writing an email or a letter, ideally, you're trying to relate it to something that you already have in hand. You're either referring to a letter that you received in the past, or maybe you're referring to an advertisement, some vacancy that you saw online, or maybe it is with regards to a telephone conversation. Okay, so you could easily start letters by using this phrase, with reference to. With reference to. I'm going to wait a little bit to see the chat box. There are 3 options I have given you in this slide, with reference to, and then there is telephone conversation, letter, advertisement. Try and make a small sentence, and let's see if we could get some of you to send me a sentence. You're referring to something that you have in hand. Maybe you got a report from someone with reference to your report. So it can be anything. Try to give me a sentence using this phrase. Even if it's wrong, that's okay. Just try. Maybe you could even start by saying, I am writing with reference to. With reference to, but you could also start by saying, I am writing with reference to. So when I say sentence, you can't just give a half-baked sentence. Half-baked වාක්‍යයක් දෙන්න බෑ. Full stop වලින් ඉවර වෙන වාක්‍යයක් දෙන්න ඕනේ. Let's see if at least one of you could give me a sentence by using this phrase with reference to. Just think a little bit. Slide එකේ තියෙන options පාවිච්චි කරලා you can easily make a quick sentence. With reference to කියලා පටන් ගන්න අමාරුයි නම්, if it's difficult to start with reference to, you could start by saying I am writing with reference to. Right. Nice. Okay, so I see someone called Asan has written with reference to an advertisement posted on Facebook. So we don't say on the Facebook, it's on Facebook. On the 25th of March, 2023, I would like to apply for the position. I would like to apply for the advertised position. Interesting. Okay, so I'd encourage everyone to just read through what different people are writing and sending in the chat box while you're listening to me. That way, you will get in a lot of words into your head. That's what's important. With reference to your letter dated 25th March 2023. So March M has to be capital. Whenever we write date, months of the year, first letter has to be capital. Right. Okay. So we have been, okay, nice. So remember, first segment end, I am hoping you would use as many phrases as possible and come up with a very, very short letter. Okay. So when I say short letter, maybe 50 words, nothing more than that. 35 to 50 words maximum. So be prepared to do that. So first we started off by saying, dear sir, madam, if we don't know who's receiving, or if we know who's receiving, using dear Mr., but you don't use the first name, you would use the last name. Let's move on to the third phrase from here. Well, now when you're writing formal letters or emails, it's quite possible that you're attaching something. It's quite possible maybe you're attaching your CV. Maybe you're attaching some kind of information the other person needs to know. This is one of the well-used phrases to tell the receiver that you have attached something. When you're using Google, you might have you might also have found, I don't know if you've seen this or not, I have seen this, it is kind of automated. If you use the word please find attached, and let's say you don't attach anything, Google reminds you, or rather kind of prompts you, have you forgotten to attach? It asks you that question. Have you noticed that? Anyone? Especially if you're using Gmail, when you're writing emails and okay, let's see, I'm getting a couple of, oh, okay, right, yes, I'm getting a couple of yeses there. So Google has this interesting way where it will prompt you. The moment you use this phrase, Google prompts you in case you forgot to attach, and then you're like, oh yeah, I mentioned this phrase, but I have not attached. මේ phrase එක මම පාවිච්චි කරලා තියෙනවා, ඒ document එක attach කරලා නැහැ කියලා. එතකොට මතක් වෙනවා ඔයගොල්ලන්ට Google එකෙන් ඒ prompt එක එනකොට. Well, so I am giving you a couple of phrases you could use with please find attached. So you can either say please find attached, or you could say please find enclosed. Both are interchangeably you could use it, right? So maybe you're attaching your CV. So you can say please find attached CV, and then you can end it by saying for your kind perusal. So perusal is more like consider. Please consider what I'm sending you. That's the meaning of perusal. Okay, you're asking them to consider. Or you could say if perusal, if you forget that word, for example, you could just say for your reference. Both are equally acceptable. Okay, but perusal is a bit of a, you know, a rich phrase you can use. Please find enclosed CV for your kind perusal. It might seem like a funny word to some of you, because if you have not heard that word before, that is. ඒ වචනේ පාවිච්චි කරන්න. You're just telling that person මේක පොඩ්ඩක් consider කරන්න. මම යවන මේ CV එක පොඩ්ඩක් බලන්න. Open කරන්න. So that is what you're trying to say with that phrase. Okay. So far we have gone through the opening, and then you're referring to what you're writing about, and then you're telling you have attached something. Okay. So 3 phrases done. Let's now move on to the next phrase. Now you have told what you wanted to tell. That last line is also very important to tell the receiver of your email or the letter if you're expecting any kind of reply or action from them. Okay, so especially if you're expecting a reply, අනිවාර්යෙන්ම reply එකක් දෙන්න කියලා expect කරනවා නම්, this is a very nice classic ending for any email or any letter. I look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to hearing from you. Now, I know, especially if you have learned grammar in a very classical sense in school or any class, after the word to, if you see ing verb එකක් වගේ පේනවා නම් මේක, you'll be like, how is this possible? To වලින් පස්සේ ing එකක් දාන්න නැහැනේ කියලා. If you are thinking, it is quite possible මෙතන මේ hearing කියන වචනය may verb එකක් විදිහට නෙවෙයි මේක පාවිච්චි වෙන්නේ, though it seems like a verb. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If any of you have that question, may ing එකක් කොහොමද මෙතන එන්නේ to කියලා infinitive එකක් දාලා, will anyone put ing at the end of a verb? It's nothing to do with being a verb. This is not a verb actually, right? So don't think too much, but there's a good phrase. There's a good sentence actually. I look forward to hearing from you. There are more phrases. For example, thank you in advance. That is, you're expecting something to be done and you want to kind of push it. But then again, you can't really say do it quickly. So you're like, thank you in advance. Mang advance thank you, which means I really hope. So that is also a nice phrase you can use, thank you in advance. But I look forward to hearing from you is what I'm planning to show you guys today, because it's a very easy one and a very classic one, a classic phrase a lot of people end up using, emails, letters, ලියනකොට. Then let's move on to our final phrase. Yours sincerely or yours faithfully. Now, there's a difference between these two. Some of you might have heard this before, but that's okay. I'm going to repeat. If you're using the word sincerely, you will know the name of the person. If you know the name of the person, you can say, that is at the beginning, if you had said, dear Mr. Pereira, so which means you know the person, then you can end that letter with sincerely. But on the other hand, you have no idea who is receiving your letter. කවුද මේ ලියුම නැත්නම් email එක කියවන්නේ කියලා, if you're not sure, then you could just say yours faithfully, right? So yours sincerely is when there is a name involved. Yours faithfully is when there is no name or you have no idea who will be reading it. Okay, so that's one basic difference I want you to remember, sincerely versus faithfully. Eka පටලව ගන්න එපා, because that kind of shows you are really on point when it comes to formal communication. And dear sir, madam කියලා පටන් ගන්නවා නම් finish it with faithfully. If you know the name and you're saying dear Mr. Pereira or dear Miss Gunawardana, then end it with sincerely, yours sincerely. And another point, now this is something I have noticed, and I think this is something you could take in mind also. When you're referring to people, ladies especially, ladies letter message, email letter ekak, if you're not sure if they are married or not, don't put Mrs., right? Even if they are married or not, if you just put MS. MS කියලා විතරක් දැම්මොත්, let me just show it in the, yes, on the screen here. You can just put MS, right? So this is common to both married and unmarried people. Okay, so you wouldn't want to offend anyone. Maybe the person is not married, but you think they are married. So you're like, dear Mrs. Kiradana, they'll be like, oh my gosh, why is this letter coming to me? Am I Mrs.? Right? So MS is a nice way to address when you're not sure if they are married or unmarried. Well, let me give you a quick recap. For the recap, then what we have learned. So one is the opening. You're greeting them and saying, dear sir, madam, or you're saying, dear Mr., dear Miss, but you will only put the last name, the surname. You're not going to put their first name. Then you're talking about what point you're going to write this email or letter with reference to. You can either start with reference to, or you can start by saying, I am writing with reference to. Both are acceptable. Thirdly, you could use the word please find attached or please find enclosed. Okay, for your emails or letters, that is something you could use. Fourthly, I look forward to hearing from you, especially if you're expecting a response. Finally, you could end it by saying, yours sincerely, yours faithfully. Now, one thing I want you to remember, put a comma. Even when you say with reference to your letter writing passage, there has to be a comma. I look forward to hearing from you, of course, is a sentence. So there's a full stop. Yours sincerely or yours faithfully, put a comma. Dear sir, madam, or dear Mr. Pereira, or whatever name that you put a comma. Those are extremely important. These are little points. Eventually, you will learn. Even if you make a mistake, that's okay. Don't worry too much about it. Eventually, you will learn. Now that we have these 5 phrases, these 5 phrases are more than enough for you to write a very short email. Okay, so think of writing an email, and I want you to use these 5 phrases and quickly type a piece of writing and send it in the message box. And we could maybe read a couple of messages, or rather a couple of emails that you write and send. So I'm going to wait for a couple of emails from your end using these 5 phrases. So we have a question from Nandana. You don't know the last name, but we only know the first name. Well, if it's a really extremely formal communication, I would say try to find out the last name. I'm sure if this is formal communication, you should be able to find out the last name. Or better stick to dear sir or dear madam. So I say some of you are trying to type the email directly into the message box, but the issue with that is you might be sending different parts of your email in different messages. So why don't you type it on a Word document if you're using a laptop, or maybe just open a note and then type it there, copy paste, and then send it together. That will work better instead of trying to type it directly. I'm just getting dear Mr. Pereira, dear Mr. Gamage coming in. Also make sure when you're referring to names, first letter has to be capital. These are little things that you could keep in mind. When you're writing proper nouns, special names, first letter has to be capital. Even madam, M capital, when you're writing that first line. Okay, so I have an interesting question from Chrysanthus Pereira. Sending a letter to a priest. We don't know the name of the person. If you don't know the name, extremely formal communication requires you to use faithfully. If you don't know the name. So if I were you, I'd probably go with faithfully, yours faithfully. I'm going to try and give maybe another 2 to 3 minutes. Your email probably could direct to something like sending a CV for a certain job. Or it could even be a certain suggestion for something that's happening in the area. Okay, we have gotten a piece of writing from Sampath. So Sampath says, Dear Mr. Vanigasekara, with reference to the telephone conversation, so of course, since you're writing this in the message box, I suppose you're writing with also on the same line. But when you're writing it in a proper Word document, the word after the comma, after Vanigasekara, comma, that has to move on to the next line. With reference to the telephone conversation I had with you last week. You don't say on, okay? You say with you last week. There is no on. I would like to discuss further about the topic on deforestation. Super. It would be much better if you could arrange. So another thing with formal communication, instead of using can, could is a better word to use. It would be much better if you could arrange a resource person regarding the above subject to clarify the things within next month. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Yours. So there you know the name. Right? So when you know the name, how do you end it? And we have another one from Asan. Dear Mr. Thomas, with reference to the meeting held on 24th of March 2023, please find the attached cost report for your review and approval. I look forward to hearing from you. Yours sincerely. Well done. I think that's a good piece of writing. Okay, that's extremely well done. So Sampath, well done. At the end, since you put the name, Vanigasekara, you know Vanigasekara's name, which means you will end with yours sincerely. Nice. Okay. Let me just read one more from Thianisha. Dear Madam, so M has to be capital, Thianisha. I'm writing this letter and try not to, I know when we write in school, we have been taught to write under that comma, where the comma is stopping, we start from there. But in formal letters now, you don't do that. You could align it to the left. Okay, so I'm writing this, can move to the left. I'm writing this letter with reference to inform the reason to the absence of last lecture. Okay, so the first sentence, Tanisha, I'm seeing a bit of a fragmentation in your sentence. And writing W-R-I-T-I-N-G, I'm writing this. This is more of a informing thing. You're not referring to anything, right? You're not referring to anything that happened in the past, or rather, this is you're informing them the reason for your absence. So maybe you could say, Dear Madam, I'm writing this letter to inform you the reason of my absence at the last lecture. Please, P has to be capital. Every time you start a sentence, the letter has to be capital. So that's something you need to keep in mind when you're writing formal letters. After a full stop, if you're writing again, you're writing another sentence, first letter has to be capital. Please find the attached medical report. You don't say, please find the attachment medical report, but rather you'd say, please find the attached medical report for your reference. I look forward to hearing from you. So again, I'm not too sure if you'd be looking forward to hearing from anyone when you give a reason for your absence. You could just say, hope you understand, or you could just finish it with thank you. You don't even need to say hope you understand, because that's not very formal, to be honest. So you don't do that. But you don't have to say, I look forward to hearing from you, because you're not expecting a reply, I suppose. You're just informing them at this point. Okay, so we've got quite a few letters. I'm not going to be able to read through all of those. But it has been really wonderful to see how well you guys are participating and sending me different questions and even the letters that you're typing. But let's see, eventually, in between, if I get some time, I'll again go through those letters. But for now, I'm going to move forward. So now that we know the 5 useful phrases, we are going to move on to the next topic, which is how could you formulate a basic report? So here again, we are talking about the basics. I'm not going to go into linking phrases, because there are linking phrases you use to compare and contrast, because different reports are for different reasons you're writing at the end of the day. So I will not be able to talk about all of that at once, but I'm going to give you some pointers to think about whenever you are writing a report. And let's see if we could go through a short sample of a very short report that I'm going to show you. It's more like a 1-page report written in about 150 words. Well, reports, they always have a purpose. Reports have a purpose. Any piece of writing for that matter, it has a purpose. Now, when you're writing letters or emails, you can always mix your opinion a little bit there. You can put your imagination a little bit here and there. That's completely fine. To an extent, I'm saying. Generally, formal communications are very factual. Formal communications, ඔගොල්ලෝ පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ යම් දෙයක් to the point කියන්න. වැඩිපුර විස්තර දෙනකොටත් මේ නිකන් අනවශ්‍ය දේවල් නැතුව, you will always stick to the point, right? But in the report, it is quite strict. Whenever you're writing a report, you're referring to something that has already happened. Already happened. The report is all, which means you're referring to an event that is already over, and you're highlighting factual points. So it can be points of concern, points that you thought went well. Also, you could give a certain area where you could make recommendations. So if you think about reports, reports are very factual. Vadipur adjectives done naha. Adjectives are basically words you use to make a piece of writing very colorful. Articles were godak adjectives පාවිච්චි කරනවා මිනිස්සු, but when it comes to a report, you're not looking at a lot of adjectives, or you're not trying to put words just to fill the word limit. Now, I know when I'm talking about this, maybe in an office setting, it'll be different, but in universities, report එකක් ලියන්න කිව්වම, you have to write, let's say 500 word report කියලා කිව්වම, ඒ 500 words එනකම මොකක් හරි පොඩි වචන එකතු කරලා ඒක හදන්න try කරනවානේ අපි. So that is something a lot of us try to do. But generally, if you're writing a report, let's say for a corporate purpose, you wouldn't really bother about, putting words for the sake of putting. And of course, reports do have a section where you could put your recommendations. You can give your recommendations. Also, opinions, if you're giving, opinions could only come under recommendation. Don't mix it in the main part of your report. When you're writing reports, one thing to remember, it's always factual. Vadipur adjectives done nepa. It makes it very informal. The more adjectives you put, it becomes extremely informal. So purpose, to talk about something past, factual, recommendations, opinions, always save it for the recommendation section. Well, now let's look at the language. So there's a purpose, people write a report. So when you're writing a report, it is good to use passive voice. Again, there are exemptions from this rule. I have seen reports where sometimes people have to say directly who is responsible for something. But generally, when you're writing a report, now lab report එකක් ලියනවා කියලා කියමුකෝ. You wouldn't say, I added 2 grams of, and name the chemical or whatever. You would say 2 grams of chemical was added. Which means passive voice කියන මේ වචනය. If any of you are struggling with, oh, okay, what is passive voice? I don't understand. Passive voice කියන්නේ ඒකේ හේතුව, passive voice පාවිච්චි කරන්න හේතුව ඒ ක්‍රියාව කරන එක්කෙනා කවුද කියන එක අංගන්න පුළුවන් passive voice පාවිච්චි කරලා. The whole point of passive voice is you can easily hide වැඩේ කරන්නේ කවුද කියලා කියන්න නැතුව මොනවද වැඩේ කියලා විතරක් කියලා you highlight the action. Action එක මොනවද වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. This is the problem, or this is what has happened. You don't tell who did it. Now, let's say you're sending a complaint for that matter. Complaints in your area to the mayor or to a government organization. You try your best not to like show, maybe you know in your head, but when you're saying it, you don't say it that way. You use passive voice so that you can hide who did the action and you just give what has happened, right? You just tell the event. Another point, now this is not only for reports, this is for any formal communications. Contractions, avoid karanna one. Now, if you're like wondering what are contractions, because the word contractions has many meanings, to be honest. But in a language sense, in a grammar sense, contractions kiyanne, let me just type on the screen a little bit. You don't say I'm. Apostrophe dala, vachana dekak ekatu karana eka, karanna epa. For any formal piece of writing. Never use contractions. Okay, so this is a mistake some people make. So please be aware of it. Kavadavat, you don't put I'm, natame, you would put something like you are, they are, he is. So these are words you have to avoid. Basically, apostrophe dala, vachana dekak ekatu karana natham can't, words like can't, sorry, words like can't, shouldn't. Okay, so please avoid these kinds of contractions when you are writing reports, not just reports, any piece of formal writing. Use the full form. And remember, your language has to be very formal and objective. Report so formal again, remember, no contractions. Try your best to use passive voice. Don't try to tell, don't expose the subject. If you're able to highlight the event, that's a very good report you're writing. And finally, in terms of language, you need to proofread. So proofreading is extremely important. So one app or one website that I always keep recommending, of course, Google Word document itself gives you enough and more options to proofread if you all know how to do that. Or the other option you can do is there is an application called Grammarly. I highly recommend that you check out Grammarly. There is a free version also, as far as I remember. You'll have to probably Google and check. So Grammarly is a very good app and a website for you to check if your grammar is on point. Okay. So just to give a recap about language, avoid contractions mainly, passive voice. Kriyawa highlight karanna karapu ekkena kawuda kiyala mainly kiyanna nathuwa. Now I'm sure most of you will be able to think of examples and think, oh, me wage deyak aavot I have to mention no kiyala. I'm just saying try your best not to. I have seen reports, passive voice completely use karanna bariwa. They do write the subject as well. But especially lab reports, I know for a fact, lab reports, you can't say I added this or I mixed this chemical with that chemical. You can't do that. You will have to give it in passive voice. Let's move on to the next part then. So we just completed the purpose. Then we moved on to language. Now that we spoke the important parts of a report, or rather the important pointers to keep in mind, let's talk about the structure. Okay. Now, again, I am not going to talk about a very comprehensive report because reports also, there are different types. So I will not be able, it's not possible, humanly possible to like touch upon every kinds of report. But I'm going to show you a short report at the end of this slide. First, you need to have a formal title. The title has to be formal. Then article එකක් ලියනවා නම් ඔයගලන්ට you can write something like the best holiday I had, or something of that sort, where you put a lot of adjectives. But this has to be a formal title to the point. Okay, so depending on what you're writing, title has to be extremely formal and try to keep it precise. On ගොඩක් දිග report title එකක් නැතුව, I personally believe in writing a title between, let's say, 5 to 10 words maximum, nothing more than that. Okay, 5 to 10 words maximum in your title, because I know some technical reports, it needs more information, so it can always vary. But remember, title has to be extremely formal. Again, contractions දාන්න එපා, informal words දාන්න එපා. Second one, report, the other point is you always have to have subheadings. Report එකක් මේ essay ලියනවා වගේ, articles ලියනවා වගේ, you can't write it all at once. You need to have subheadings. And subheadings, as you can see in my fourth point here, you will definitely have an introduction. And then you have your main points. Let's say you're talking about problems in terms of garbage collection in your area, and you're trying to write a report, just hypothetically speaking. So introduction එකක් දෙන්න ඕනේ ප්‍රශ්නයට මේකයි ප්‍රශ්නය කියලා introduce කරන්න. Then maybe the issue is probably delay in collecting organic waste. And maybe the second point is burning polythene and plastic. So you could easily think of subheadings under introduction. Prashne නැත්තම් points highlight කරන්න ඕනේ introduction එකේ පස්සේ. Okay? And then you could have your conclusions, recommendations. You can have different subheadings where you would write about those sections only. I think මේ වගේ different sections යටතේ හැම එකේම opinions දෙන්න එපා. Now, let's say you're going to talk about delay in collecting organic waste. So, ethering, you can't just write your opinion and say this kind of behavior will lead to communicable diseases in the society. Communicable diseases in the society, මේ වගේ දෙයක් සිද්ධ වෙන හන්දා වෙනවා කියන එක ඇත්ත තමයි. But you're not going to put it under that specific section. And delay එකක් තියෙනවා කියන එකේ delay එක ගැන විතරයි කතා කරන්නේ. You will talk about මේ වගේ දෙයක් වෙන්න පුළුවන් මේ වෙන හන්දා කියලා කතා කරන්නේ under recommendation. Okay? So that is something you have to keep telling yourself, because without your knowledge, ලියාගෙන යනකොට වෙන දෙයක් තමයි, without your knowledge, අදාළ නැති තැන්වල වැඩිපුර information දෙන්න try කරනවා, especially when writing reports. And this is something even the most seasoned writers go through. So you're not alone. So remember, subheading එකක් දාපු ගමන් delay in collecting organic waste නම් ඒ ගැන විතරයි කතා කරන්නේ. එතන මොනවද වෙන්නේ? මේ වෙලාවට එනවා කියලා එන්නේ මෙච්චර දවස් පරක් වෙලා. So those are probably information you will write in that section instead of trying to say මේක හන්දා මේක වෙනවා කියන එක. Don't put it there. It will go under recommendation. I'm just trying to give you a very general example. And in reports, now you might have heard of an executive summary. Then executive summary is, again, it is a small piece of summarized version of what you're saying. Now, all the reports are not 20, 100 pages. Hammer report. There are reports that are just 1 page, 2 page reports of Tiana. Okay, so reports, not all of you should think, oh, report, it has to be 100 pages or 50 pages. No. Reports can even be 1 or 2 pages. I think a report executive summary ka අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ නැහැ. Okay, when you're writing a very short report, you don't need an executive summary. ඒක අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ only when the report is a little longer, you will need an executive summary so that anyone, and also if you're writing a technical report, then engineer කෙනෙක්, if they're writing something technical, ඒ technicalities හැමෝටම තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. එතන ඔයගොල්ලෝ දාලා තියෙන abbreviations or numbers හැමෝටම තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඉතින් executive summary ඔයගොල්ලෝ මේ කාට වුණත් engineering background නැති කෙනෙක් වුණත් ඒක කියවලා මේකයි මම කියන්න හදන්නේ කියලා they should get an idea. That's the whole point of an executive summary. Okay, so ඒක ඇතුලේ ගොඩක් jargons පාවිච්චි කරන්න එපා. Jargons දැම්මා නම් remember abbreviations දාලා එතන you have to mention මේකේ term එක මේක තමයි කියලා you'll have to mention those as well if it's a very very long report. Okay, now I am going to show you a quick sample. Okay, so this is a very basic sample. It's about 150 words if I remember. This is the question. Okay, this is the question. I'm going to give you a short work here also. Here you have a gym you have worked for, and the gym members have been losing members. Gym එකට එන කට්ටිය දැන් අඩුයි. And then you need to know why they are leaving. Gym manager is asking you, write a report why these customers are leaving. Can you quickly give about 5 subheadings for this report? 5 subheadings කියනකොට අනිවාර්යෙන්ම එන top මේ subheadings එකක් තියෙනවා. එකක් තමයි introduction, අනිත් එක conclusion. So මැද හරියට එන ඒවා තමයි you really have to think about. Can you quickly think of, let's say, subheadings that you could write off for this kind of a question? So I've underlined what you should focus on in your report. The problems. What are the problems? Okay. So Randini, thank you, but try to put just put comma and write it all together and send it across. Type it all together and send it across. Because if you start typing one by one, I'm going to get it as separate messages, and it might kind of get diluted when the other messages start coming in. Okay, so Janaka has sent. Now these are very generic, Janaka. I'm clearly giving you a what do you call a question here. So if it's a question like this, now let's say I don't have the time to read the full report. I won't read the whole thing. I will only read the headings that you're writing. So your heading has to give me an idea. Okay, this section talks about this. Most of you are giving me very technical words. Introduction, conclusion. Okay. Are you able to think about a couple of problems and break it into 2 or 3 subheadings? That's my question. Okay, I'm getting very technical answers. Introduction, employee turnover, reasons for turnover, recommendations to overcome turnover, conclusion. Right. Okay, so since I'm getting a lot of technical subheadings, I'm going to move on to the next slide to show you the report. Okay, so there is problem identification. So these all seem very fancy, actually very technical. Okay, but what I'm trying to show you is this is basically this report is like a 150 word report we are talking about. Okay. Okay, right. Let me show you the slide. So if you look at the introduction, it's always good to start by stating the aim of the report. So aims again can be broken down into goals. Aim is one thing, goal is a different word, but that's okay. For the purpose of this short report, we'll just call it the aim of this report is to explain the main reasons. So you're making it very simple. You don't have to use any very complicated terms. Sometimes I know we are exposed to really complicated terms and told, okay, you have to use this word. No, report has to be easily digestible also to an extent. Okay, when someone is reading your report, they need to easily understand what you're trying to say. So the introduction is given there. After interviewing some clients, so there itself, as you can see, they have mentioned the method, how they've started writing the report. They have interviewed, they mentioned that. After interviewing some clients, we have identified some serious problems. So as you can see, there are 3 categories. The 3 categories are the 3 subheadings. 3 subheadings are directly pointing out to the problem. So if you just say problems, or if you just say analyzing the problem, or some technical word like that, I'll again have to read a paragraph to identify what exactly you're saying. But when I look at this, just by reading through the headings, I'm like, oh, okay, limited opening hours is a problem. So maybe some are not able to come. I don't even have to read those 3 lines under limited opening hours. The changing room. So maybe there are people who are finding fault with the changing room. Something is not right there. Lack of parking space. So do you see, you're directly telling. Now, some of the phrases you're giving me in your message, in the message, is those are words you could use in a really long report. Now, I told you clearly this is a 150-page word report. Okay, it's a 150-word report. So here you don't have time to just say problem analysis, solutions. Then I have to keep reading every big paragraph that you're writing. Here you have an introduction, 3 problems, conclusion. So recommendations, they have not given here, but of course in a report, as I told you, you are free to use recommendations also. That's where your opinion has to come in. But if you really see this report, this specific report, if you see, there are certain areas where opinion and recommendation has come into the same section. For example, lack of parking space. As a result, this might encourage members to use their bikes to come to the gym. We can offer a parking area for bicycles. So here they are writing opinion. So the reason why this has happened here, though I earlier told you you're not supposed to put opinions inside these subheadings, is again, this is a very short report. So for the purpose of the presentation, I'm showing you a very short report in just 1 slide for you to have a greater understanding. But if you're writing a longer report, which I guess would be the case for most of you because you're all professionals, so you're going to be writing longer reports, then please don't do this, okay? Please write your opinions and suggestions and all of that under the recommendation section. Okay, so is everyone with me so far? Okay, so I do see some proper headings coming in now. Lakshita has mentioned using old equipment. You mean membership charges, excessive membership charges, right? Interesting. So far, so good. How's it going? Because I can't see what you're feeling or thinking right now. So has it been useful? Are you learning something that you could take back to your professional settings and use? Okay, thank you. But again, remember, this is just a pep talk. More than saying, giving you a lot of information about reports, is just a pep talk for you to get started. Don't just hold back thinking, oh, I don't have enough English knowledge to start writing a report. No, nothing like that. See how simple this report is. Okay, so if you get the idea of the overall method, or rather the overall flow of writing a report, you can eventually build from there. So it's always the start that's difficult. And then when you start building, it becomes easier. Okay. So we have more or less covered 2 heavy parts. The next part is, I'm not making it heavy at all because I know that that is something we'll not be able to finish in just 1 session. But I will try to talk about why the next part is important. So first we spoke about 5 useful phrases, අපි කතා කරා මුලින්ම ඔයගොල්ලන්ට formal communication එකේ පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් phrases 5ක්. ලේසියෙන් letters උනත් email උනත් ලේසියෙන් දා ගන්න පුළුවන් පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් phrases 5ක් අපි කතා කරා ඒ ගැන. And then we moved on to report. So report එකේ first we spoke about the purpose. ඇයි අපි report එකක් ලියන්නේ? report එකක් ලියන්නේ past event එකක් ගැන. ඉස්සරහට එන දෙයක් ගැන report ලියන්නේ නැහැ සාමාන්‍යයෙන්. Usually reports are to refer to things that happened in the past. Usually, again, reports, you could always kind of ask questions and say, no, Rochelle, there are reports like this. I'm talking about generally, okay? In a general sense, reports are to talk about things that has already happened. And then we spoke about language. Language එකේ මම කිව්වා passive voice පාවිච්චි කරන්න. For those of you who are not sure මේ passive voice කියන්නේ මොනවද Rochelle, if you're thinking. So passive voice is essentially ඔයා කියන්නේ ක්‍රියාව කරන්නේ කවුද කියලා, but you're highlighting the ක්‍රියාව, the verb, or rather the action is being highlighted. That is the important part of the report at the end of the day. And then we spoke about contractions. Contractions කියන්නේ you have to use words in full form, apostrophe දාලා කවදාවත් පාවිච්චි කරන්න එපා. And even when I was going through some of your writing, I do understand we have problems with capitalizing sometimes. Dates ලියනකොට, months ලියනකොට, months එම first letter has to be capital. Then March, April ලියනකොට MAM simple වලින් ලියන්න එපා. It has to be capital. That's very important. And if you're writing names, first letter has to be capital. So more than grammar, මේවා පොඩ්ඩක් focus කරන්න. Grammar, it's a lifelong learning. You will be making mistakes in grammar and then eventually getting back up. But මේ වගේ දේවල් you can do. Unnecessary තැන් වල capital දාන්න එපා මැදට. And then use your punctuation. Dear sir, madam, put a comma, that's important. Yours faithfully or yours sincerely, put a comma and at the end. Those are important things you could definitely use to let the receiver know that you are someone who's professional at what you're doing. Samara velawata, people who read your emails will judge you based on your writing. Okay, I think grammar ekata wada me wage podi dewal first take note, and then you can build from there. Right, let's move on to the next part then. I'll probably take about, I think I'm going to take about just 10 to 15 minutes maximum, I'm hoping. And then let's stop it there and ask you questions, or rather see if you have questions.
Rochelle, sorry to disturb you, but you can take another 20 minutes because I think it is quite interesting. So why can't you go until 9 o'clock? So it's 8:40.
Right. I do have a few questions at the end for them to answer.
Right.
So let's see how much they have understood in another 15 or 20 minutes. Let's do that. Sure.
All right. Okay.
Okay. So the final part, abstract. Now, abstract, some of us, like I've written abstracts and it has petrified me. Petrified කියන්නේ මං බය වෙලා තියෙනවා abstract ලියන්න කාලේ. So that happens generally because you are writing maybe something for 100 pages and then someone comes and tells you then make a summarize karanna in 100 or 200 words. That really is a problem. I personally have felt that pressure when trying to making mono aragena mang me abstract එක හදන්නද දන්නේ නැහැ කියලා ඔලුවට යනවා. And then recently I was thinking about abstracts, and what I remembered was basically all of us are familiar with reels, right? YouTube became reels, Insta, when you scroll through, you watch reels. So anyone who could probably tell me, I think I've given the answer here. I should have asked this before, but yeah, let me tell this without asking a question. So generally people use reels on social media because our attention span is very short, right? We have a very, very short attention span. I think when we give something in bite size for people, it becomes easily, what do you say? It gets picked up. It gets picked up by the YouTube algorithm. Kattiya tagala share karna godak e wage deyak siddha wenawane. When you think of reels, that's the whole point. YouTube eke hari, Insta eke hari reels. Samara velawata without you knowing, this has happened to me. Reel එකක් බලනවා, තව එකක් කෙනෙකුට ඒකත් බලනවා, and before you know it, you have spent about 15 minutes just watching reels and doing nothing else productive in your life. So there are times that happens. I was trying to compare reels and abstracts. Now this word abstract is generally used in the scientific research community. Research pattern now, especially if you're in university and if you're thinking of, writing a thesis for some specific research that you're doing, remember, abstract is like a reel. Abstract එකක් ඇයි ඔයා ලියන්නේ කියලා තේරුම හරියට අරගත්තා නම් if you have that in your mind properly ඊට පස්සේ ඒ වචන ඒ ටික හොයා ගන්න පුළුවන්. That's not a problem. ඇයි ඔයා මේ දේ ලියන්නේ කියලා ඔලුවට අරගන්න. In the scientific community, you become a good researcher only when you have more citations for your thesis, right? ඔයාගේ thesis එක ගොඩක් කට්ටිය review කරලා තියෙනවා නම් ගොඩක් කට්ටිය කියලා තියෙනවා නම් then you're like, oh, this person I know, I've read from. Again, ඔක්කොමලම දන්නේ නැහැ ලෝකෙ ඔක්කොමලම දන්නේ නැති වුණාට like in your scientific community, ඔයාගේ trade එකේ ඉන්න community එකේ කට්ටිය දන්නවා. The moment you put up a few theses online. So one place I'm sure you would have used when you're writing your thesis, if you have written one already, or if you're someone who's still looking to write thesis, Google Scholar. So that is the place, a normal Google search engine ekema scientific version ekak wage nika. That is where you would always Google for all these scientific research articles and literature. To review literature, that's where people generally go to. So here, what happens is when you have a good abstract, when you have a really good abstract, it gets picked up. When you put enough and more keywords, then YouTube eke unat keywords කියලා you give keywords, right? And then based on those keywords, the algorithm picks up your content. Similar thing happens when you are writing abstract. You might have written something for like 5,000 words maybe. But a 5,000 words, maybe only the person who is assessing and marking you and a couple of people who are reviewing your work will read it, if at all. And even them, they won't read all 5,000 words. I'm sure you know that. Abstract is extremely important for your work to get picked up. So remember, this is why you need an abstract. And let's look at what is important about an abstract in the next slide as well. So now that we know abstract is similar to putting up a reel on YouTube or Insta. So few things. So when you're writing an abstract, this is the last thing you do. You don't write your abstract first. This is something I have been told by my lecturers, and it's true, and I have personal experience writing abstract. So you don't write an abstract right at the beginning. Make a podi ekak ivara karala ඊට පස්සේ 5,000 words වලට යමු. You can never do that. First, you have to finish your research. You figure out what your research is going to be about, the methodology, and then you have your calculations and results, all of that put. And then once you complete your thesis, eken tamai you're going to extract your abstract. එතනින් තමයි ඔයා ගන්න ඕනේ එතන තියෙන key words මොනවාද? ඒ key words ටික යොදවාගෙන abstract එකක් ලියන්නේ. So typically now 150 to 500 කියන එක I actually found it online, but I would say maximum 200 or 250 maybe. Don't go more than that. Again, attention span. Bigger abstract එකක් තියෙනකොට ඒකත් අමාරුයි කටියට කියවන්න. Okay, so the typical word limit is about, from my point of view, this is again 500. You can go up to 500 if it's a really long thesis that you've written about. But in a typical sense, about 200, 250 maximum is more than enough when you're writing the abstracts. And sometimes even short abstracts I've seen, like 150 words were enough. You can really keep an abstract simple and strong for your research to be easily highlighted within the scientific community. So one thing about abstract. So again, unfortunately, I can't show you samples. Abstracts were to me samples scale. It's very difficult because abstracts can be written from different fields and not everyone will be able to kind of understand all the different fields. So if I choose something from my background, it might not really go well with some of you. So I'm not going to show you any examples, but rather, let me tell you, it has to even short, at least 1 or 2 words have to talk about your aims. And then you at least have to have a small phrase, on 3 to 5 word phrase, talking about what method you're using or what software you're using to do your either quantitative or qualitative calculations. And then you have to mention your result. Again, results also. Now, this result you're putting up only to bring some validity. Then, Metan, I have seen some people using words like may, like in my what do you call it? In my surrounding, in our scientific research, I have seen people using certain abbreviations. And abbreviations, well, obviously you have a separate section. Make a meaning, make a tamai kiela. You do give the whole long form water abstract take, you do use them just to show people that your research is valid. But if you really think about the overall reason why you're writing a research abstract, it is for it to be easily picked up. Ek lacing pick up when no godak katti etana thiyena keywords balala. Keywords welling, they have to be like, oh, okay, so this has something to do with my research. Mang me wage research ekak කරනවා, මේ research එක්කම සම්බන්ධ දෙයක් තමයි මෙයක් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. So ඒ හන්දා you will think about in Sri Lanka, what are people talking about generally, even when you're thinking about a research topic for that matter. Eating ekak ekka yana words, if you use in your abstract, it will easily get picked up. And remember, abstract is equivalent to a reel that you put on YouTube. And one more important thing, abstract take you will never cite. Citations done the QA met me information generally, I'm sure I'm not going to go into details of that. Within bracket you put the year, the name, the last name of the person and all of that. So that is not needed when you're writing an abstract. You're only putting information out there with keywords. Okay. And one more thing, when you are compiling, then compile karna ne metik okkoma dala compile karnakota, though I told you abstract is written at the end, abstract එක attach karanne right after your title page. Okay, right after your title page, even before acknowledgement. Acknowledgement ema karana megolanta thank karanne and thank you ema කියන්නත් කලින් right after your title page ඔගොල්ලෝ ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ abstract එක compile කරන්න ඕනේ when you're giving a full print or even a PDF document එකක් හදනකොට completely. Remember that your abstract will be your very next page after your title page. Okay, so these are few things I want you to keep in mind when thinking about abstract. And again, abstract is also a formal piece of writing. So no contractions, පාවිච්චි කරන්න එපා. Even without your knowledge, එකපාරටම can't, shouldn't, ඒ වගේ වචන පාවිච්චි කරන්න නැතුව write the full word and keep it short and simple. ගොඩක් adjectives අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. Again, you're keeping it to the point. Okay. Well, so that's the only point I wanted to talk to you in terms of abstract. I'm not giving more information on abstract. Just that is enough for now, especially if you are a researcher who is just about to start or getting into research. Hopefully, some of this might have been useful for you. Well, now that I've been talking quite a bit, it's time for you to tell me, or rather let me know through the messages, if you've understood what we spoke about. Let me move on to the next slide. I have 3 questions, okay? I have 3 questions, and I want you to answer. I want almost all of you to take part in this. I want you to answer and give the answers in the chat box for the following 3 questions. So these are based on whatever I've been talking in the past 1 hour and 15 or 20 minutes. This is one. So I've given you 3 sets of words. How are you going to write this when it's formal writing? Try to write all of that with commas so that you're not sending separate messages. Put comma and send your comma or slash. Okay, So the second word when you're writing, for example, they have, H has to be simple, okay? When you're breaking the two words, the second word, first letter has to be simple. It can't be capital. Okay, excellent. Right. I am getting a lot of people replying. Nice. Okay. Let's move on to question 2. Two common subheadings of a report. What are two common subheadings of it? There you go, Tirina. Thank you. Yes. So you can easily think of, oh yeah, introduction, conclusion. Those are very important. Okay. So I know some people struggle with the word conclusion. I've seen people putting TION at the end. Don't do that. Of course, when you're typing, the Word document itself will correct it for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So conclusion is CONCLUSION. And remember, when you're writing those subheadings, the first letter has to be capital. Very good. Okay. Right. And then my final question. Where do you include your abstract? You can just give me the number. Okay. Right. So the answer is correct. Thank you. It's right after the title page. Okay. So it's a bit funny to think of it. Okay. That's the last document you write, but still that is the first thing you'd attach right after your title page. Okay. Right after the title page. Well, so that's about it from my end in terms of 5 very useful phrases you could use in formal writing. And next, we spoke about report. We spoke about the purpose, the language, the structure. And finally, I touched upon, I didn't even go into it much. I just touched upon abstracts as to why people write abstracts. So whenever you're writing an abstract, tell yourself, I'm creating a YouTube reel by writing this abstract. So that is a nice way to kind of pump yourself up because or else your research will just go with other thousands of research and it will not be picked up. So if you have a really good abstract and if you're able to upload it or kind of share it with people in your scientific community, that is for surely that will get picked up. Well, now that's about it from my end. I am open for questions.
Rochelle, that's the moment I felt that I have listened days of lectures, just concise into 1.5 hours. So it's brilliantly done, and thanks a lot for taking everything into a just simple reel of presentation to make it so concise. And let me start with a small question: that how you gauge that a movie trailer generally it's pretty much like, for me, is it a real type of a thing or an abstract type of a movie? Like if you have a trailer at the beginning of a movie, what kind of how you gauge it, how you say label it in your wordings? A trailer is what sort of a thing?
A trailer, again, it kind of it taps into your desire of wanting to watch the movie, right? The moment you watch the trailer, you want to watch the movie. So again, reels, trailers, it has similar purpose, to be honest. They want to get more audience and attract more audience towards their content.
So the same strategy you can start with, like even your abstract when it comes to a bigger report?
Bigger report, of course, the same thing will be done in the executive summary then.
That's what the word I was just looking for, the executive summary. It's what, and once you have an executive summary and abstract would come to the same document, which is it?
Now in a thesis, I don't see executive summaries because when we think about thesis, it's a more of a research related, scientific research kind of document, whereas more academic in that sense. An abstract is more academic in my head, okay? An abstract is more academic, whereas a report, an executive summary is more corporate. But again, you would write reports, for example, in labs, I know. So there you're not thinking about executive summary or anything. It's just very basic report writing where you use passive voice and no contractions. But executive summary is only needed when you're writing a technical reports in a corporate sense.
Okay, yeah, thanks. And there's a question in the chat box. Shall we move to the questions in the chat box, Rochelle? It's mentioned that where it is applicable to use kind regards, best regards, and regards at the latter part of an email, say?
Well, in an email, it is okay to use. Now, in my case, I most often end up using best regards. There is no such thing as where you should be using. You could use it in formal communication as well, but I would probably use it more with people I would consider as acquaintances. Acquaintances are people you have at least met once or spoken to over the phone once. But if I'm writing to, let's say, the government, I wouldn't really think of putting best regards or kind regards typically. I would say thank you, and I might finish with regards and my name. I wouldn't like even bother saying best or kind.
Okay. All right, thanks. And there are very many compliments to you. Let me read out one compliment. Today's lecture is the most interesting one. So that's one of the kind of best compliment we have, apart from our thanking note. And all right, Sanjay, can we start letting them to ask their questions straight away? We can use hand raise option, and then you can ask your questions if you have any questions to ask straight away from Rochelle. All right, and there was something you mentioned about the Grammarly, and it's about the grammar mistakes. And sometimes there are, I could remember that even when it comes to the advanced versions of words, you have some phrases to be corrected or sometimes to be changed. Is it again the recommended? Because sometimes I personally have experience because I want to tell something and the word or the Microsoft Word says that, okay, it has to be the other way around. So have you had that experience of sort of a ambiguity of whether I'm correct or MS Project is correct?
Sometimes it gives you that if you have to use punctuation in between. Right. You probably missed a punctuation somewhere in between, like a comma. That has happened to me also. Not just MS Word, not just Microsoft, even the Google documents, they also do the same thing.
Right. Okay, we have a hand raise from Nilanka or Nilanka. Sanjay, can we give him or her an opportunity to ask a question? Nilanka or Nilanka, you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to ask about the conclusion and abstract. What are the differences? How can I identify that? That's the most important point when we are going to input the abstract and summary. Yes. Sorry, abstract and conclusion.
Right. So if I were to rephrase your question, Nilanka, you're asking the difference between a conclusion and an abstract, yeah?
It is.
Okay. So a conclusion in a sense of a report, you could start by saying to summarize. These are phrases, like these are linking phrases. Now, today I never spoke about linking phrases at all, but you do use linking phrases when you're writing formal documents. You're linking it with what you said previously. To conclude, So these are phrases you would use when concluding to give an overall view of what you have written in your report. And that conclusion comes at the end of your report. That's the very, what do you call it? Excuse me. That's the very last subheading of your report, conclusion. Abstract, on the other hand, you are writing it at the end, but you're attaching it right at the beginning. And more than saying, it is also a kind of summary, if you really think about it. It is also a kind of summary, but more than summary, you're going to keep in mind what are some keywords that I need to use here if I want this abstract to be taken seriously by the scientific community. What are some words that's going to give me that advantage of my work being cited again by another researcher? That is when your worth goes up, right? As a researcher, when you write abstracts. So that is how I would differentiate both conclusion and abstract. Abstract, you're thinking more about keywords. Conclusion, on the other hand, you're not really, you have to think about keywords, but it's more of a summary. You are including keywords, but you're not thinking about, oh, will anyone read my conclusion? That's not in your mind. But abstract, who's going to read it? Will people pick it up? Will people cite my work? Is going to be on your mind when you're writing an abstract. I hope I answered your question.
Rochelle, if I'm to put into a different analogy, is it something like an opening and a conclusion of sort of things, or would it be pretty much the same thing? Because in abstract, you have to encourage people to read that out, and as you will mention about the keywords are there, obviously. And the conclusion is what we conclude with our opinion and put into some recommendations or sort of thing.
Well, but I wouldn't call abstract an opening. Abstract, it actually has everything, right? You would put a little bit of your results. You would put a little bit about that name of the software, at least, that you used to do your analysis. All of that will have to be included so that the person, the scientific researcher who's reading it will be like, oh, okay, this has more credibility. You're not just using flowery words, you're using points plus keywords. You're putting points for them to know that your research is very much valid. So abstract in that sense, I wouldn't really call it like an opening per se.
Okay, there's a question in the chat box. Though the recommended way of writing a report is to use passive voice, I have seen some journal articles researchers have used an active voice as well. Could you please elaborate on this more?
Yeah. So again, writing, the rules are made by humans. So we make the rules. So there is a word called diction. So diction is coming up with new words. For example, who thought the word Google or YouTube will be a verb? But now I can tell a sentence like I could say, Nalin, please Google this. I'm using Google as a verb, right? So do remember that these rules are made by us and we do tweak the rules on and off. That is why, if you remember, I did mention even during the presentation, though we say passive voice is ideal, lab reports for sure passive voice. I've seen, like, if people don't use passive voice, they are called out and they are told to use passive voice. Generally, it is passive voice, but it's quite possible to use active voice also, depending on the context.
All right. Okay. Thanks. And Govindu has a message that can you please put the attendance sheet link to the chat? Yeah, maybe Govindu is in a hurry to mark the attendance, and okay, Govindu will put into the chat box that on time. Rochelle, that I just wanted to highlight, just put your attention again back to one of the best areas which I'm interested, that I'm looking forward to hearing from you, which to and hearing, but then later I've just Googled myself, and looking forward to itself is being used at once, and then the hearing is nothing but a word, like it has to be a verb as starting with to. No, it's not the case. So it is looking forward to is something, and then hearing is something. Just can you please just highlight again, because that could be quite controversial when it comes to letter writing or report writing, and especially email writing.
Yes. So as you said, look forward to. like group it together at once and think of looking forward to as one whole block. On the other hand, you're actually using I could say, I'm looking forward to the present.
Okay.
I could also say I'm looking forward to getting the present. So I'm looking at the action, and the action is actually a noun phrase. In a grammar term, it's called a gerund, G-E-R-U-N-D. You can Google it later. It's called a gerund. Okay, so it looks like a verb in a sentence, but it's not really a verb. It does the work of a noun. So that is what happens there. You can even make it past tense. Let's say you're talking to someone. You could say, I was looking forward to hearing from her, but she didn't get back to me. There you're changing the whole thing into past tense and talking, I was looking forward to hearing from her. So hearing from her is another block. That's an action. So there seems like a verb, but not a verb. It's a noun. And in a grammatical sense, we call them gerunds.
All right. Thank you, madam. And we have Lassana Viratunga and Nuwantara. We'll give the opportunity to Lassana Viratunga. First, Lassana, please try to put your questions as brief as possible, and we'll give opportunities to others as well. Lassana Viratunga.
Thanks. When we are writing reports, do we need to follow any specific font types and font sizes?
There are certain fonts and sizes that are recommended as professional. So if I write a report, I find myself using, you could either use Times New Roman, right? Or even Arial, if it's a little. I always think of professional writing as, it has to be very square. The font has to be very square and prim and proper, whereas it can have more curves if it's informal. That's my way of thinking. Okay, so Times New Roman is a good font, and generally I've seen, what do you call it? Generally, they do advise you to use certain fonts, especially if it's from a university point of view. They would tell you to use either 12 or 11. So those are the possible fonts, and size would generally be 11 or 12. Times New Roman, Arial. That's my take.
That's your
generally.
fonts. Yeah, that's your
Yes.
recommended fonts. Okay, thanks. And Rochelle, you mentioned about something like connecting words or the conjunctions or sort of things. When it comes to a report writing, for technically, if it has to be, say, 1,000 words. So those conjunction and other 2, 4, and all these things are considered as words. It's a layman's question, I believe, that when it comes to 1,000, is there any way of counting the words, like it has to be 1,000, minimum 1,000 words presentation or sort of a report? So how it is being counted generally, by the pages? So is there any way of
You can count the word. The word count can be taken from the Word
by the
document.
word itself, a Word document. So those words are everything, right? Even the 2, 4,
Yes.
and in everything counts as words.
That is when your head might suddenly kind of tell you, oh, instead of saying should not, can't I put shouldn't? Then it's like one word. Let's say you've written it way too much than what needed. Then you're like, okay, now I need to shorten this. So without your knowledge, to shorten, if you're using contractions, you're doing something wrong. So that is where you have to be mindful.
Okay. One simple question in the chat box: are email letters legal? I think, are email letters legal?
Depends on the organization. Depends on the organization you're dealing with. To the government, I know in Sri Lanka, you can't send emails and say that's legal. That's not yet legal, apparently. Yes. So they will say, if you want us to take action, send papers. So I know we send emails sending don't print or do not print, save trees and all of that. Generally, in your email signatures, we tend to have those nice quotes and whatnot. But unfortunately, when we're dealing with the government in Sri Lanka, especially, you will have to print and send. That's legal.
Yeah, that's true. And then when it comes to construction industry and other projects, basically, so now the emails are considered as legal correspondences right now.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. not the government, but just construction project in the international arena. But again, sometimes you have to make that email printed and file it as correspondence. Okay, Nuantara, we have a question. Nuantara Bacon.
Yes. Like, first of all, I would say like it's a nice presentation. Like, thank you for it. So, and regarding the question, I just want to know, like, in an abstract, you said, in an abstract, usually it goes, the word counting may go from depending on the assessment or the typewriting, but, like I'm an undergraduate, so as an, what, like, as for like us, is there a particular ideal count that they're expecting? Like, is it around, is there, like, in your way, like, is there a particular count that you guys think an abstract should be?
From what I know, from my experience as an undergraduate sometime back, I could tell you generally you'd be asked to write a one-page abstract. So one page, depending on the font size and the font and the size that you're using, could be anywhere between 150 to 250.
Okay. So like that's the ideal type, like rather than that, I don't think it wants, long.
Yeah, they will generally not allow you to have an abstract more than one page.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rochelle. Our pleasure. And Rochelle, what sort of a report you referred? That is it a research? This is so that one page abstract is referred for how big report or sort of a how big correspondence.
Let's say you're writing a 6,000, 7,000 word, somewhere between 5 to 7,000 words, then you're putting the abstract into just 150 to 250. So that is a massive task that requires a lot of mental energy, and you need to center yourself to come up with that abstract.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And Sanjay, I think it's time to put our attendance sheet as well, ladies and gentlemen. If you are, if you're willing to obtain your certificate, you have to mark your attendance in terms of minimum of 5 sessions out of 6. Now it is in the chat box of Zoom, as well as I believe that Sanjay would put into the YouTube chat box as well as the attendance sheet. And to have the access to YouTube chat box, you have to subscribe the channel. So please put into, please mark your attendance only through this Google form. සියලුදෙනාගේම අවධානයට දැන් chat box එකේ අපි අද chat box එක හුඟක් busy නිසා chat box එකේ ප්‍රශ්න ගොඩක් තියෙනවා. chat box එකේ නිසා කරුණා කරලා Google form එක තියෙනවා. ඒක ඉක්මනට mark කරන්න. ඒත් එක්කම ඔබ YouTube එක බලනවා නම් YouTube එකේ chat box එකේ දැන් Google form එක තියෙනවා. ඒක mark කරන්න today's attendance හැටියට. විශේෂයෙන්ම YouTube එකේ chat box එකට access තියෙන YouTube එක subscribe කරලා තියෙන කට්ටියට විතරයි. ඒක නිසා ඒක mark කරන්න ඔබේ attendance තහවුරු කිරීම සඳහා. Rochelle, there was another question about that Quillbot. I think it was there somewhere even in the previous chat box. I said I think the Grammarly type of an application, Quillbot, how it is useful. Yeah, I think it's another application which people used to use. I think.
Right. As long as it is a legit application that allows you to check your grammar, please go ahead and use it. I've not heard of Quillbot as yet, but I will definitely Google and check it out. Thank you, Sampath. Oh, I hope you're not asking, is this something similar to ChatGPT, where whatever you give, it just paraphrases?
Yeah,
I hope it's not that.
No, this is not ChatGPT, but again, Quillbot is used for paraphrasing as well, I could remember.
All right, okay.
Paraphrasing is completely a different subject, I believe. That are you in a position just to give some 2-3 words about the paraphrasing as well? The professional paraphrasing, how it has to be?
Synonyms. That's the word that comes to my mind when I think about paraphrasing. So you have to think of synonyms, and again, word helps you find synonyms. Again, it's trial and error. You might be using synonyms. You see a certain word and you're like, oh, okay, whatever word I use instead of this word is okay. No, it might change the meaning altogether. So you might have to Google before you paraphrase and use a different synonym. I can't think of an example right offhand right now. But I've come across synonyms where I would like to right click and go under synonyms and check. It wouldn't give the same meaning if you use any of those options. So there are certain options only that word would work, or you will have to give a completely new phrase instead of that phrase. So good place to start would be use synonyms and then take it from there.
Okay, Rochelle, there's another chat box question. How do we integrate the synopsis to say documents, and where you gauge, and what are the position you put in as a synonym synopsis? Yeah, sorry. You're muted, Rochelle.
Yeah. How do we integrate a synopsis? Integrate synopsis to a document in what sense? That question isn't too clear.
Just forget about the integrate word, and I think that he might need about the synopsis and how you apply your theories today or your applications today to synopsis.
Just a minute. I'm trying to find something while talking to you guys. So again, synopsis is a summary you're giving, right? So if you're talking about summary, your synopsis is derived from documents. I don't see why it would work the other way around. A synopsis is basically a summary you're talking, because we humans have come up with different words for the same thing. So synopsis, think of it as summary. So summary is derived from the main document. So you wouldn't really think about writing the summary first and then putting the summary into the main document, right? So it's always the other way around. You don't integrate synopsis to a document, but rather you would integrate the document into your synopsis. That should how it generally works. That should how it works.
All right, thanks. Sanjay, shall we put attendance sheet? I think there are few maybe might have just joined or maybe might have experienced this clearing of the chat box. Shall we put the attendance Google form again, please? Sanjay? Okay, compliments, many, thank you, valuable presentations.
Thank you, everyone. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's Rochelle for you as a response. All right. Thank you. And there is something for us as well. All organizing members done very valuable job. Okay. Rochelle, now it's almost the latter part. So we have about 10 minutes to conclude. And you have anything else to conclude the session as your conclusion? And you wanted to have some 5-10 minutes just to conclude? For us?
To conclude, nothing too special, to be very honest, but I just would like to wish all of you a prosperous journey in writing, in terms of formal writing. I'm sure you're going to use these in your communications, and I hope you at least picked on one point that you could remember throughout and then build from there. This is not everything. This is just the stepping stone. And that's about it. Nalin, thank you so much for the opportunity as well.
Yeah, pleasure. And it's not just one point for sure. And I would rather happy if we can just take 1 minute in Sinhalese as well. Please.
Sure. So මට ගොඩක් සතුටුයි අද මේ අවස්ථාව හම්බ වෙච්ච එක ගැන. මට කියන්න තියෙන්නේ මේක ඔගොල්ලෝ පටන් ගත්ත තැන විතරයි. මෙතනින් ඔගොල්ලෝ ඉදිරියට යන්න නම් lifelong learning කියන එක very important. ඒකට continuous professional development කියලා කියන්නේ. ඉතින් මේ series එක උනත් මම දන්න විදිහට මේක continuous professional development එක ඔයගොල්ලන්ව direct කරන විදිහට තමයි මේ workshop series එක ගියේ. මම ඔයගොල්ලන්ට congratulate කරනවා මේ අද ඉගෙන ගත්ත දේවල් සති කීපයකින්ම ඉගෙන ගත්ත දේවල් එකතු කරලා ඔයගොල්ලෝ පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ life එකේ. And I just wish you all the best. ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ writing journey එක තවත් සාර්ථකව එන්න ඕනේ කියලා මගේ wishes ඔයගොල්ලන්ට. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle, and thank you very much for the nice session, and one of the nicest I could say out of these 6 sessions. And I'm not going to gauge every session, but I think that is one of the best when it comes to the report writing and these language skills. Thank you very much. And thanks, audience, for being with us for last 6 days. And what I requested at the beginning itself, if you are into a WhatsApp group or any communication group by the Magnus Academy or the M+ project team, so what I recommend is please be within the group. So there will be a lot of programs in the future, and there could be some monthly talks, and there could be some different programs planned. And please be with us and join with us. And if you wish to take your certificate, I believe that you compelled to be within the group, so that all the communications what we have is maybe through some emails. At the same time, the WhatsApp is our easiest and the quickest way of having this communication. So with that remark, thank you very much. විශේෂයෙන්ම අවසන් වශයෙන් පොඩ්ඩක් සිංහලෙන් කියන්නම්. අපි දවස් 6ක් පුරා පවත්වපු workshop 1 එකේ lecture series එක නැත්නම් session series එක අද අපි conclude කරනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම රොෂල් අර මුලින් කිව්වා වගේ අපිට සියලු දේවල් එකපාරට cover කරන්න බෑ. නමුත් අපිට අවශ්‍යතාවය තිබ්බේ මේ එක එක කාරණාවල තියෙන වැදගත්කම ඔබට highlight කරන්න. මම හිතනවා සහ අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා මේදී අපිට ඒ දේ කරගන්න පුළුවන් වුණයි කියලා. විශේෂයෙන්ම ඔබට අවස්ථාවක් දැන් තියෙනවා. අපි විශේෂයෙන්ම WhatsApp groups වල අපි දානවා sessions 6ම record කරපු YouTube එකක, ඒක open YouTube links ටිකක්. ඒ 6ම තියෙනවා. ඒක නිසා ඔබට අවශ්‍යයි කියලා හිතන දේක් සහ අවශ්‍ය වෙලාවක සහ අවශ්‍ය කෙනෙකුට මේක share කරන්න. මේ knowledge එක අපිට අංගගෙන ඉන්න ඕමනාවක් නැහැ. අතරම විශේෂයෙන්ම මෙතන අපි දන්නවා 99% ඉන්නේ ශ්‍රී ලංකන්ස්ලා. අපි ශ්‍රී ලංකන්ස්ලා හැටියට අපිට ගොඩක් challenging කාලයක් තියෙන්නේ සහ ඉස්සරහට තියෙන්නේ සහ විශේෂයෙන්ම අපි තවත් strengthen වෙනවා නම් අපිට මේ skills එක විශේෂයෙන්ම අසල්වැසි රටවල් අපිට සාලෝකයේ තියෙන ඉදිරි කාලය ගත්තාම අපිට challenging කාලයක් තියෙන්නේ. ඒක නිසා අපි skills හදාගෙන විශේෂයෙන්ම අපි ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ හැටියට මම හිතන්නේ මේ knowledge එක සහ skills තමයි අපිට තියෙන ලොකුම talent එක to move forward. ඉස්සරහට යන්න තියෙන අපි තම කුඩා රටක් සහ පොඩි ජනගහනයක් ඉන්න රටක්. ඒක නිසා අපේ ශක්තිය වෙන්නේ මම හිතන්නේ විශේෂයෙන්ම knowledge එක. ඒක නිසා ඒකට අපි එකතු වෙලා වැඩ කරමු සහ අවශ්‍ය කවුරු හරි තව ඉන්නවා නම් ඒකට මේකට එකතු කරගන්න. ඔබ ලබාගත් දැනුමක් තියෙනවනේ, දැනුම ෂෙයා කරගන්න. ඒක තමයි අපිට අවසාන වශයෙන් කියන දේ. සහ අපි හදලා තියෙන groups එක හැම වෙලෙම touch එකේ ඉන්න. ඒ වගේම යම් කිසි දෙයක් ඉගෙන ගන්න පුළුවන් නම් ඔබ සහ ඔබේ අනාගතයේ සහ ඔබගේ subordinates ලා අපි පල්ලෙහා ඉන්න ගෝලයෝ උනත් කමන්නේ. අපි කතා කරන්නේ විශේෂයෙන්ම corporate world එකේ ඒ සියලු දෙනාම දැනුවත් කරලා ඒ සියලු දෙනාම groom කරන්න. ඒක ඔබේ වගකීමක් සහ යුතුයකමක් වෙනවා. ඒක ඇත්තටම ඔබ රටට කරන හොඳ දායකත්වයක් වෙනවා. With that remark, I would like to highlight a few people behind this process, especially Sanjay Andrade, who has been my co-partner in Magnus Academy, and there are a few more people from the academy and the people behind this Zoom platform and YouTube platform. And there were many people who helped us making flyers and managing WhatsApp groups. So I would like to thank everybody. And I would like you finally, as the greatest of audience we have had, and especially even by 9:30, we have still more than 150, and to be precise, it's 173 right now. Thank you very much for being with us, and let's work together and grow together. And I'm sure that the challenges will convert into opportunities, and I'm sure that we all have that skill to make those challenges into opportunities. And if you have these arsenals or the tools of skills, I'm sure that that's the only way out for all the challenges we have. With that remark, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening, and please be in touch with all the groups, and let's work together, as I mentioned earlier. And we are always with you to help and groom and grow together. It's not just a single person's activity, and it's all about the group's activity. So thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening and good night. I'm signing off. This is Nalin De Silva from Magnus Academy and the group, the project team of M+ project as well. Thank you very much. Bye.